Hello, everybody. How's it going? Ben Gothard here, and today we're doing another Project Egg interview. We're talking with Jacynth Bassett from London. How you doing today, Jacynth?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Thanks for asking. So, I
Great.
really want to thank you for coming on the show.
No, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, let's jump right in with the first question. What is your story?
Oh, okay. I'm 25, recently 25, and I started my business, thebiascut.com. It would have launched its officially back in March 2016. And it's a fashion business. We're an online multi-label boutique for stylish women over 40. But in terms of my story, I actually studied law at Cambridge and always thought I wanted to be a lawyer since I was about 13. And then I got there and decided I didn't. And it was a bit of a shock to the system in a way, given it was something I'd always envisaged I'd do. I'd have a very clear cut path myself. But while I was there, I was also president of the Law Society, and I realized I didn't like law as much, but I liked business. So that was when I decided I wanted to go into business. And then fashion, I guess, again, it's quite a contrast to law. So I basically, fashion has been one of my main interests all my life. I've taught myself a lot about the industry since I was quite young. And I just decided, having done everything as a means to an end to get to university, I really wanted to do something I liked and cared about. So I decided I might as well finally do fashion. And then I thought about my mum, and she loves style, she loves looking good, but I mean, she's now in her 60s, but even since really her late 40s, she's felt that the fashion industry is very ageist. There's a lot of, what we all know, how much imagery is based on youth. Clothing is very much youth orientated, and even the brands that are selling more expensive pieces, they always use 19-year-old models to model everything, which doesn't really make sense. So I decided I wanted to create a space for women to shop like her, who could feel good about themselves and find clothing that was just as modern and fashionable and stylish as anyone else, but it wasn't going to take hours searching for the right pieces or finding things that would flatter her body, because after all, women's bodies in particular do change with age, with hormones, and not have to see imagery that didn't look like her. So again, I mean, that's why we use real women over 40 to model everything. And yeah, that's really the story so far. And then I started a blog about 2 years ago, it would be now, and that was to gain a following, speak more to women. As I said, I'm not my customer, so I wanted to understand what they were looking for. And I found what was really nice was how many women liked the fact I was younger, because I was quite worried about that. But instead they said they felt it was more objective and they trusted me more, and that was really nice. And then I was going to originally wait for investment to launch the business, because particularly with fashion, it's quite capital intensive, even online. But then my suitcase got stolen off a train, and it had all my belongings in it, and that was about 2 years ago now. And I got all the insurance money back, and I thought, rather than replace all the things that I don't need, why don't I just use the money to finally start the business? So that's kind of where it was. So then finally it launched in 2016, and then we're a year on, and we started with 4 labels. I've now got 19 with another 4 coming in the next couple of months. So it's going well.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So, I wanna dig a little bit deeper into your history. So, can you talk a little bit about your childhood, like where you grew up, what sort of household you were raised in, and how that has really carried over into your entrepreneurial life today?
Sure. Okay, so I grew up in southeast London. So, I mean, I'm in Greenwich now, so not very far from where I am. And I come from, I guess, what you would call a traditional household, mum and dad and an older brother. But my parents had me when they were older, so I guess that's always given me a bit more of an eye for understanding what it's like for older parents and older people a bit more than, say, having parents who were in their 30s. And then they themselves were both lawyers. So my dad still is a lawyer. My mum was a lawyer. She's retired now, although she probably wouldn't like me admitting. She likes to call herself semi-retired. So I guess I've always seen ambition a lot in my family and having a really strong work ethic. I've always been brought up to think you have to work for things. You can never be self-entitled to have things. I have been very fortunate because I come from parents who've worked very hard, and I've been very lucky to have traveled a lot in my life since I was quite little. I have had lots of nice clothes, so obviously that's meant that I could appreciate nice things. But I've never thought I deserved it or would just get it. I always knew I had to work my ass off to get that, because my parents themselves came from pretty average backgrounds. So they've really worked very hard. And to be honest, they've sacrificed a lot to get where they are now. So it's probably also meant that I have sacrificed a lot as well. Since I was about 10, I have worked. I was known as an exceptionally driven person. And I mean, I did more A-levels than other people. I would work till about unhealthy hours in the morning. I'd probably work till about 2, 3 a.m. in the morning just for school. And I also did a lot of dance. So my main hobby aside from fashion is dance. So I used to do about 6, 7 hours of dance a week. So I've worked very hard to get where I am. But entrepreneurial wise, I guess I haven't had any people in my life who've really shown me that way. Actually, my brother, of all people, he has got a business, and he was the one I think everyone would have thought would end up in business. I would be the academic person. So it was quite, I guess I came late to realizing I liked being in business. Yeah, apart from that, I'd say, well, actually, to be fair, my mum did have a small women's maternity wear business when she was younger, but that was before I was born. So again, it wasn't anything I witnessed. But as I say, for most of my life, it was all academia, very working hard. Like my goal was to get to Cambridge, become a lawyer, everything was mean to an end. So I never saw myself going into the business world. But that said, when I did projects at school, now I look back, I realize a lot of them were based on fashion businesses that I just selected. So clearly it was in my back of my mind somewhere. But yeah, I guess it's not your conventional route in some ways.
Absolutely. So, you mentioned how hard you've worked your whole life. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of hard work in entrepreneurship, and maybe just give a little bit of insight on that topic?
Yeah, I think the main thing is to have resilience, and that's why you have to work hard, because you are going to have setbacks and things are never going to be as you expected from the beginning. You can write a business plan, and I strongly recommend writing a business plan to give you structure, but it's not going to go to plan. So you need to be able to keep working hard to realize that it's not quite what you're going to expect. I think a lot of the time at the moment, we see a lot of media coverage about overnight successes, and people who, a lot of startups that went from zero to everything within what seems to be a month or two. And I think that that's very misleading. First of all, a lot of those businesses actually have been going a lot longer than they portray in the media. And even those that haven't, they've had to work so hard, particularly in business. You're thinking about, you live and breathe what you do. You're thinking about it every day. I'm walking around, I'm in the shower, I'm watching TV. Anything can inspire me or give me an idea. So I have to work hard to make sure that I keep aware of these things and keep going and don't give up. And I think particularly when you're starting from scratch, again, you won't have a team around you who can do everything. So you've got to realize you're going to have to learn skills and do jobs that in a bigger business you wouldn't be doing, but you're going to have to do it. And I think I think the main thing is to realize that it's going to take hard work and not to be upset if it's going to take a lot of work, and there are going to be setbacks, and those setbacks you have to keep learning from. I think the hard work as well isn't just the practical sense, but it's emotionally hard as well. So it's quite I know a lot of entrepreneurs, including myself, you end up battling some inner demons at times, a lot of self-doubt, and you're going to have criticism. Some's going to be good, some's going to be bad. I mean, online, I get trolls at times, which isn't very nice, but I guess I have to accept that's part of the world we're in. So again, working hard to realize that that's okay and keep going is really important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, you mentioned setbacks as being just a natural part of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I want to talk about that a little bit. Can you talk about the importance of being able to deal with setbacks and give some insight in how you actually deal with setbacks?
Yeah, well, I think it's always worth recognizing that you're not going to be perfect. No business person knows everything. And I was talking to someone else the other day who's been very successful in business, and they said to me, if anyone says they know everything in business, they aren't to be trusted, because they don't. So inevitably, you are going to face setbacks. And the key, I think, is to recognize that you can learn from it and move forward and not beat yourself up. I think personally, I'm my harshest critic, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs are. And you need to make sure you realize, okay, there's a reason this has happened. What can I take from it, and what can I move forward? I mean, actually, I had to give myself a bit of talking to a couple of years ago, because I said to myself, you're going into business, you are going to have setbacks, you are going to have criticisms and constructive comments, and it doesn't mean you're perfect, it doesn't mean you're bad either, but you can't take it too personally, and you have to be able to take a breath and go, okay, there is something to learn from this. And I think because you put your heart and soul into the business, it is quite hard to separate the personal emotion from just the business side of things, and being able to do that is really important. And also recognize you might not have understood, for example, in fashion, you might not have understood your customer quite is who you thought they were, and there's nothing wrong with that. You might have a vision for your brand, but you might find certain things are selling more than you expected, or you're attracting a certain customer that you didn't anticipate, and you need to, rather than be annoyed and fight that, you should learn to adapt and realize, actually, okay, there's something to learn from this. I mean, for example, when I launched the boutique this March last year, a lot of my clothes were a bit more corporate and they were a little bit more expensive. And I realized that a lot of my customers weren't looking for corporate, but were looking more for pieces they could dress up and down, so smart casual. And also, particularly online, they weren't comfortable with spending that level of money at the beginning. If you're like a huge retailer who's very, very well known, then you might feel comfortable with it. But if you're a new brand, you're not convinced necessarily you should be spending, upwards of a couple of £100 online, more than that. So again, learning from those mistakes is really important, and adjusting, because I think it's the people who fail to adjust who end up really struggling and end up actually not doing as well as they could.
So, I really like what you said about adjusting. And, there's a quote that I've heard, and the name escapes me if you said it, but they said in entrepreneurship, we have to be rigid in the problems that we're trying to solve, but flexible in how we go about solving them. And so I think that kind of, does a little justice to what you were saying. But can you talk a little bit about the importance of pivoting, right? Because you were talking about how, your target market or perceived target market was, group A, but it was actually maybe group B, with a little bit of overlap. So can you talk a little bit about, in your own experiences, how you pivoted and when you knew it was the right time to pivot?
Yeah, so after my first season, what I was able to do is I did a lot of events. So as well as being online, I did a lot of pop-up parties and went to corporate city firms and did events with them. So it was a really good way of having a one-on-one with customers to understand their feedback and what they were looking for. And I, for example, had a lot of women say to me, I'd wear that if I was in XYZ job or whatever, but I'm not looking for that anymore. So that was where the alarm bell started ringing. And as you say, it's important though, you can't just let one or two comments start to sway you, because that could just be them. So I had to make sure I listened to a lot of women. And I created a forum as well online called Ageism is Never in Style. And that's got now about 2,000 women on it. So again, I was able to start talking to them, and these are women all across the world, and do polls and things like that, and really understand more what they were looking for. And I also started building up relationships with personal stylists who again would tell me this is what their clients are looking for more than that. So after my first season, I thought to myself, okay, let's start pivoting slightly. And I didn't overlap with the next season. So this would be autumn, winter 16. And I still had some of the corporate pieces, but I also had some slightly more relaxed or also some partyish items. And then I watched the sales, and it was quite clear. My sales completely, went through the roof that season compared to the previous season. And what they were buying again was the party pieces or the more relaxed, casual, like the cashmeres and the pretty shirts. They weren't buying blazers and trousers and things that you would perceive more for work. So that was when I realized, okay, clearly this is what they're looking for. And then this season, I've been able to build on that again. There has been the odd thing still, but again, it's been clear that's not selling. So next season, I'm able to now fully shift into what I think is now becoming a clear identity for the brand. And I've had people say that to me. I can see now your brand has an identity. So now what's happening is customers know exactly what they're looking for when they come to me. They're not going to be surprised with something completely different. And that's what I think is important, is to really keep listening. And I remember it was actually what my mum said when she worked, when she was in the legal world. She said she was an in-house lawyer, and she said, one criticism could be just them, but if you start getting a few, it's likely about 7 or 8 more people are thinking the same thing. And that's what I started to realize, was there was a trend here. And that was why I decided to pivot. But as you said as well, that's still sticking to the true vision of the brand. I could have gone, I'm going to suddenly stop even selling to women over 40 and just go, okay, instead I'm going to be the corporate woman in their 30s or their late 20s. And I wasn't going to do that. And actually, I spoke to quite a lot of investors, and who would say, well, do this, do that, that'll make you a quicker profit. And yeah, obviously in business, you want to make money, but I have a purpose for what I wanted to do. And I said to them, that is going to completely undermine the whole vision and mission of this business. So I wouldn't do it. So, product selection doesn't change that, but other ways of selling did. So that's why I decided to change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I want to dig a little bit more into your history. Can we talk a little bit about your time in high school? And you said you were very studious, always staying up really late and learning. So maybe you could talk about your time in high school, and then maybe take us through your college years as well.
Sure. Okay. So when I was at high school, as I said, I was kind of considered, I probably would say, the class nerd. I was very studious. I went to an all-girls school. So I think that helped me, actually, because it meant it's a cliche, but you didn't feel pressure for, boys or anything like that. I could just really focus on what I wanted to achieve. And that was ultimately to get to Cambridge and become a lawyer. So I was pretty much an all-rounder, but I was also, I was very studious, but I was also very creative. I was good at art, and I used to make a lot of crafty things. But I guess my time up, because of being perceived as the nerd, it was a kind of a bit up and down. I did have periods where I was bullied, but I just knew what I wanted to achieve, and I was willing to keep going. But I do think I sacrificed a lot of things, particularly socially, to achieve that. By the time I got to being about 16, 17, I had much more of a social life, and I had a boyfriend and things like that. And by that point, I'd kind of got into a routine. I knew myself and how I would study, so I was able to balance that a lot better. But I think if I had not been able to focus so much from when I was about 10, it wouldn't have been as easy. And as I say, I think what I always knew was I have to work to get what I want. I mean, my mum would always say my family would never be a family that would just get things on a plate. We all had to really work hard to achieve things. So I knew, to be honest, I didn't have a lot of faith in my academic ability. I just believed I achieved good grades because I just worked so hard. So it was important for me to do that. But as I said, I did a lot of dance. That was a good outlet for me. I think emotionally and physically, it was a good way of having separation. And I also lived quite far away from my school, so it was also harder to necessarily see friends as well because of that. But then when I got to university, I guess it was a bit more, well, university's a bit, I was around a lot of people like me. When you go to Cambridge, I think everyone there has had to sacrifice what I've spoken about to get there. They either haven't had much of a social life, or they haven't had many other extracurricular activities or something like that. And so everyone there is a little bit, as I would say that everyone there is quite unusual, because it takes a lot at the age of 12, I think, to say I'm going to sacrifice my kind of teenage years to get to a university. I don't think that's not what most teenagers would do. So I think you have got to be a bit unusual to get there. So it was quite nice being around people who had been through a similar experience to me. And actually, I ended up having a really good time there until I realized I didn't want to go into law. And suddenly, unfortunately, I didn't enjoy the degree as much as I might have done. And also, it was actually quite a ruthless atmosphere doing law in the second and third year, because we were very fortunate being at Cambridge that a lot of the law firms wanted us to work there. So they would really be trying to attract us with lots of fancy dinners and things like that. And it also meant people were kind of being quite dog eat dog to get noticed by the law firms, and it was a very competitive environment. We had our grades posted in the center of town for everyone to see. Your room could be dictated by what your grades were, and that was fine if that was a system that worked for you. But given I didn't want to be a lawyer, and also I was there just to educate myself, I wasn't there to compete with loads of other people. So unfortunately, that was the downside. But by the time I realized this is what I wanted to do, it actually took the pressure off, because suddenly I didn't care so much about my grades, except for just getting a good grade. It wasn't like I need to get this grade to get this job. And also I was able to tailor actually my whole law degree to business related modules. So again, that's meant I've been able to save a lot of money with starting up a business with legal fees. But yeah, it was a mixed time. What I would certainly say is I feel most comfortable now than I've ever done in my life. I feel I'm in the right space, and I feel I'm in the right industry for me. And when I meet up with friends from university and they'll talk about law, or sometimes I end up back at a law firm for other reasons, for doing events, it doesn't feel like the world I was meant to be in. So that's at least, I'm glad I realized that, because a lot of people said to me, you should do a conversion, because I know it works differently in the States. You do, it's law is post-grad, isn't it? Whereas we don't have that here. And a lot of people said to me, why don't you do a conversion? So that would kind of be like postgrad. So I'd do a degree in English or something, and then do a year converting to law. And I'm glad I didn't, because I would have wasted a lot more time converting and then realizing that it wasn't for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, when you were talking about how you feel like you're in the right space, and
Yeah.
it seems like you've really come into your own. I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that, right? Whether it be figuring out what their purpose is, or figuring out what industry they want to go into, or what kind of business they want to start. There are all these questions that so many people have. Based on your experiences, how do you answer those questions, right? How do you figure out exactly what you should be doing and where you should be going?
Well, I think for me, it was just doing something funny that I loved. As I say, I spent most of my life doing things that I didn't love in order to get the grades and to get where I wanted to be. I thought law would be something I loved, and it wasn't. I used to have people say to me at school, "Oh, you clearly just love working and all these things," and I really didn't. It was just, for me, what I felt I had to do to get where I wanted to go. So for me, it was really just going, well, what do I actually like? And it was quite clear fashion was my escape. So like when I was at university, even if I was feeling low and studying law, my walls were covered with pictures from Vogue, and I would just be able to look at them and feel a bit more relaxed. Or if I was studying, actually my ex said to me before we started going out, he saw me in the law library. Everyone else was working away, and he saw me reading a fashion blog, and so it was quite obvious. I guess fashion was where I just wanted to go, because other than that, the only other thing I would do is become a professional dancer, and I'm not good enough to become a professional dancer. So it would be, I think just doing something you love and doing something you know a bit about. Because I do know about the industry, and actually my ex at the time, he did a fashion law dissertation, and he didn't know anything about fashion. So I had to teach him all about the industry, and it turned out I did know what I was talking about. So I think you need to do something you really like and you really know about. There's no point going into an industry that you don't have a clue about. I think there are some people who are entrepreneurs, and obviously we're driven by wanting to be successful and making money, but they just come up with an idea that makes kind of no sense to who they are as a person. And I think if that happens, they're better off finding a co-founder who does have a passion for what it's about, and then they can run the sort of the strategic business side of it, and the other one can run the front and the whole concept and develop the idea. I think that's a better way to do it if you're just stuck on making money with a certain idea. But other than that, I think you do need to start with what you know and what you enjoy, because it is, as I say, it's a hard grind, and you're not going to be able to have really any time off from it. So you might as well be doing something you like, because there are days I don't like what I'm doing, but overall I do. And if I really didn't like what I was doing at all, it would just not be worth it, and I'd end up very miserable. So and then finding the business within that then does take time. As I was quite fortunate that I found my niche very quickly, because I realized with my mum there was a gap in the market. But for those who don't have an obvious answer, then I think you just need to do a lot of research and a lot of speaking to people. But again, try and see yourself as, if you're either see yourself as you're the customer, or if you're not the customer, someone you know should be the customer. Don't do something completely left field in an industry, because I think otherwise, again, you won't really know where to start.
Absolutely, and I really do think that that's great advice, so I want to thank you for sharing that.
No,
so, I want to talk about dance for a little bit, because it seems like that has been another truly important part of your life. Can you speak to your experience with dance and what really drew you into the sport? I'm not sure if it's technically a sport or not, but what drew you to dance?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of sport, I always say it's like a creative sport in that it is obviously very athletic, and I think actually there's more of an art to it even in some sports, because you have to act like you're not in pain. So I think that's also quite a big one. But yeah, so I started dancing when I was 3, and I think, I'm not sure what drew me into it. I think it was probably one of those things where parents often take their child to dance class, but I just remember being quite excited about going. I mean, I'm quite a musical. I play the piano as well, so I guess I'm quite musical generally. And I started ballet when I was 3, and then when I was 5, I started doing tap and modern, which was a kind of style of jazz dance. But to me, that was really, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't until I was 13 that, this is going to come as a potential surprise, as it does for most people. My actual main style of dance is hip hop, which most people don't assume. And I found that when I was 13, and it turned out when I had danced a lot when I was younger, like improvised on my own, that was the style I was doing. And I actually can pop and lock, weirdly. It's most people can't imagine it. And that was when I realized how much I loved it. And I think for me, it was a way of getting out a lot of emotional energy. I got to act on stage, and the best part was when I was performing, and I still dance now, but the best part was when I it would all be black, and all I'd see were the lights on me, and I wouldn't have to look at anyone else's faces, but I could just be in the moment of dancing for myself. And I think that was nice, because also you don't feel you're being judged or critiquing. I mean, I'm sure people in the audience were, but I didn't have to think about it. I could just do what I wanted on stage. And then, because of how much I love that, and obviously it's a great way of keeping fit as well, I started teaching dance classes as well through my dance school, and I actually helped produce a show for my dance school. It's not my dance school, that was my high school. And actually, it was the 10-year anniversary for that show that I'd kind of helped create last year, and they invited me back to perform, which was really nice. And then, so yeah, for me, it was, even when I was exhausted from work, I mean, a good example, talking about how much I used to work versus dancing, was I spent 38 hours one day without sleep because I was working so hard on a project. And I fell asleep on the floor at like 5 p.m. And this was when I was about, I don't know, 11, I was about 15 at the time. And then after about half an hour sleep, I just got up and went to dance class for 2 hours. And weirdly, I still had the energy to do that, but nothing else. And I guess it was just a great mental break for me. And, you know, when I'm angry, I could channel that into the dancing, or when I was sad, all these different emotions, in a way that I think dance is a beautiful way of expressing yourself. But then sadly, when I was, gosh, it would have been about 4 years ago, I got a back injury. So I actually had to stop dancing for about 2, 3, well, actually no, I only started dancing again about 6 months ago. And I've still got the back injury. It turns out it's to do with my hypermobility, but it did leave me in a lot of pain. And I had to actually spend 3 months just lying on a sofa straight out of university after this back injury happened. So that made me lose confidence, really. But then I started dancing again back in early this year. And again, I already feel better for it, and my back's already getting better. And I think it's just a really good way of getting things off your chest that you can't do unless you can't do sitting at a desk. So I certainly think if I were to have kids, I would encourage them to dance, even if they just wanted to do it for a short amount of time. I think it's just a really good way of understanding about your body, and also having body confidence, because, you know, you're wearing quite small outfits and things like that. so you can't really get shy. And I think it's a really good thing for people.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I want to talk a little bit about your transition from, going to school to be a lawyer into really your first entrepreneurial ventures. So, what would you say was kind of your first, like how did you dip your toe in the water? How did you start becoming an entrepreneur, or how did that all happen?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say the first thing I did, which showed that I had that entrepreneurial spirit, was when I was president of the Law Society at university. So again, it was that overlap between business and law, because the Law Society at Cambridge is one of the largest really globally, and I had a huge budget that I had to run by myself, and I was 19 at the time. And also the society itself was not doing well. It was in a very internally mixed up, all over the place situation when I inherited it. And I decided I wanted to restructure it and turn it into, it's non-profit, but turn it into a sustainable society that almost operated like a business. So I restructured a lot of it. I changed a lot of the policies and the constitution, and also the big thing really was that when I became president, it was just after the recession, and a lot of the law societies were really pulling back on wanting to offer sponsorship, which is what we relied on. And I drove a very, very hard negotiation bargain with all of them, and actually increased the sponsorship by 25%, which was kind of a bit of a surprise, and I think even they were a bit surprised. And it was that, and I also had to resolve a very big, it's confidential financial issue as well. So it was these things that made me realize, oh, actually, I think that there might be something there. And I'm pleased to say the society is still running as I structured it is today. And this would have been, I guess, 6 years ago now. So it's doing well. So that was it. And actually, it was my boyfriend at the time who said to me, do you notice when you want to do the law society, you're like on it. When you have to do anything about business, you're just on it. But when you want to do law, when you have to do like studying, you just procrastinate and come up with any other excuse not to do it. So that was kind of where the alarm bells rang. And then, as I say, I then structured my rest of my degree to being business related law modules. So I did a lot of contract law and commercial law and overseas international law with contract, all these things. So that was really helpful. And then when I graduated, I did take a little bit of time out. Obviously, as with a back injury, I couldn't do much for a while. But even then, I was doing a lot of research, and I had this idea, so I started researching it and looking at competitors. I then did a survey with quite a lot of people to find out more about that. And talking about setbacks earlier, again, that was something that was a setback, because there were a few things that came out in the survey that were not what I had envisaged my customer would want. And also the other thing was I realized was terminology was something that I had to be really careful with my customer as well. So again, that was something that took me a little bit of adjusting to, but I got around it. And what's nice is actually when I launched the business, the people who had seemed slightly more negative in the survey wrote to me and went, right, now you've got what I want. So that's great. So that was really nice. So I had to really listen to them. But that was really how it started. And then I started writing my business plan. I used a book from the Financial Times, which was an amazing book. And it really helped me see things from angles that I hadn't before. It proposed things in, it was quite different to your standard business plan book, but it was very good at being a little bit more outside the box. And really, I just went from there. So by the time I got that investment from my insurance, I was able to really know where I was going and just get going. So I'd already been to the trade shows. I'd already got a list of the designers I was interested in. I already knew what I wanted the website to look at and all my servers and who were going to, all these things. It was all planned so that I could just go. So it didn't take, obviously it took I had to do stuff after I decided to go, but it didn't take a huge amount of research then to get going. So I guess that was really the main transition. And then, that would be it, really.
So, you mentioned how you had, or you were doing a blog, and you were doing your forum, and then you launched your business. Can you maybe...
Yeah, the forum came after the business, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. What was the chronology of those three things, and how did they all work together?
Sure. Yeah, sorry, it's a bit complicated. So the blog was launched in July 2015, and then it was November 2015 that I decided, right, I've got this insurance money, I'm just going to get going. And so I then launched the actual online business in March 2016. And then the blog has always been involved in that. So that's kept going, and I still write on that all the time. And then I introduced the forum, and I used Facebook to launch the forum because so many of the 40 plus market, really, that's the leading social media platform for them. And so I launched that in September 2016. And I also introduced another section to the blog called Your Blog. So I have other people who write articles which we publish. So again, it's about giving women a voice who feel invisible. It's not all about me, because it's not all, I have my ideas and what I like, but so do other people. So I really wanted to give people a platform to do that. And some of the writers are women who have their own blogs or businesses, and others are women who actually are too shy to start their own blog, but they want to share their views and their own stories. And again, it was, for me, it's just, we'll share your story. You don't have to do all the setting up of a blog or feel shy or anything about that. And the forum's done really well. And as I said, it's taken off since launching in September. And it's just a really great way of spreading the message, spreading our mission of fighting ageism in the fashion industry. And also, I said, understanding more what that woman's looking for. So we can do polls about clothing and colours and patterns, so we can make sure that our product selection is actually what they want.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, you just mentioned your mission of fighting ageism in the fashion industry. How important is it to have a mission, in your opinion, in business? When you're starting a business, running a business, being an entrepreneur, how important is it to have that mission?
I think it's really important to have a mission, because I think you will inevitably be pulled in lots of different directions. As you increasingly get successful, people will say to you, do this or do that, or they'll either make suggestions to you that aren't right, or they will ask to do things like collaborations with you that sound great in theory, and you could say, oh, I'll get loads of exposure here and I'll maybe get lots of customers, but if it doesn't match what your mission is, it completely dilutes what you're about, and your core customer will get very confused and they won't understand what your whole purpose is. So I think having that sort of a mission statement, means that every decision you make, you can go, is this going to result eventually in what I want to achieve? And if the answer is no, then I think that's when you go, okay, this isn't for me. And because you need to be able to say no as just as much as you can say yes in business.
Awesome. That's great advice. So, we talked a lot about your past. I want to talk about what's going on presently, right? So what is your biggest focus right now?
Well, I would definitely, obviously, the business. It would be really, for me, I want to continue to develop it, build on our growing customer base and also our presence. So we're still a small company, and we want to get in front of more and more people who our business resonates with. So that's both in the UK, because I do think you should make sure you can walk before you run. So for me, the focus is mainly in the UK at the moment. I don't want to spread myself too thinly. But as that is starting now to get bigger, I'm now looking at moving to the States. So I already do have an international customer base, and I've just started doing some collaborations with bloggers over 50 in the States. But really, more than anything, it's just I want the platform to become the go-to place for women looking for stylish, fashionable pieces over 40. And so finding more products, finding more content that will support that is really where I want to go and establish ourselves as that. I have a lot of other plans for how we're going to diversify in the future, but I have a very clear strategy on my yearly basis for that. And for me at the moment, it's to really establish who we are and build on that.
Very cool. Very cool. So, professionally, those are your goals, but what about personally? What are you doing right now outside of business?
That is a good question, because I often feel like not much. Well, I have just moved in to my new home with my boyfriend, so it will be nice to actually build some fun. We've been living here, well, I say we've been living here about 6 months, and we still haven't got around to building our wardrobe. So that is probably a personal goal for 2017, is to actually manage to build a wardrobe. And, obviously because I've moved out of home, obviously see my family and see my friends more, because I feel I don't get to see them a lot. And also a lot of my friends are studying still, or actually quite a few of them have decided to become architects, so they're busy all the time. So trying to fit that in is really important for me. And ideally I'd like to do some more dance. I said I do dance twice a week now, but I'm not sure I'd ever get back to the 6 times a week, but I would like to get back to a bit more for myself personally.
Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about your past and what's going on right now. But I want to talk about the future. Where do you see yourself going, both personally and professionally, moving forward?
Well, I mean, professionally, as I say, once I've built on what established who we are, I do want to develop that to be more of a global brand. And also, I do have visions to introduce my own fashion label onto the website as well. So at the moment, I do collaborations every season with one of the designers, but I would like to introduce our own line as well and build upon a lot of the knowledge that we have. So that's a big goal for us in the next few years. And also I'm doing a lot to build up my own personal brand. So I already do talks on a lot of panels for both fashion and entrepreneurs. I have written a lot of articles for people. And I've even written a chapter for a book that was published internationally. So I'd really like to build on that so that I can help encourage more young female entrepreneurs to both getting into an industry that is completely alien to them, like mine was in theory. I knew a lot about the industry, but it's different to being in the industry. And also hopefully encourage more designers and brands to really understand about the 40 plus market, because there is still, I say about fighting ageism in fashion, and I mean that in both publicly in society and also internally. And there's a two-sided battle there. I think publicly we're getting more and more accustomed to accepting that, but internally there's still a huge amount of prejudice. So I hope personally, particularly because I am younger, I can encourage more people my own age who are, say, coming out of fashion school, and work with fashion schools to encourage them to realize, this is a market that's cool, just as cool as younger people, and what is worth recognizing. So that's my main goals professionally. And then personally, I don't know if I have them any these days. I would like to just continue to work, I guess, on my own self-belief more than anything else. I think I've had a lot of anxiety in my life. I've gone through bouts of depression. And so for me, really working on that and understanding who I am and understanding other people more, and how often I do think a lot of things come down to either a lack of communication or lack of understanding from different perspectives. And I'd really like to work on that personally as well, and just continue to work to being happier.
Very cool. Very cool. So, I wanna lighten the mood a little bit with a few like kind of rapid fire questions. So the first
Okay.
thing
Oh
that comes
gosh.
to your mind, first thing that comes to your mind, just let it out. So
I know this could go terribly wrong.
it'll be fun. It'll be fun. So, if you could go back to any time period at all, what time period would you go back to and why?
This is a good question. I ask this all the time to people. So I know it's 1920s. So I'd go back to the 1920s because A, I love the fashion then, and the liberation, well, increasing liberation for women. And I think it would have been a fascinating period for post-war, the music and attitudes starting to slowly change. So yeah, that would be when I go back to. But the early 1920s, not when we started getting into the Great Depression. That would be slightly not as enjoyable.
Right, right. So if you could go back to any time period and even today and talk to anybody, who would you talk to and what would you talk about?
Oh gosh. That is a really hard question. I should be coming up with something more interesting. Um, I think I would go back to probably just go back to when my grandparents were alive, really, and speak more with them and understand more about their lives. And I mean, they fought in the second. My granddad fought in the Second World War. He was in Bomber Command, and my grandma. They married during the Second World War, and I think I I feel I would have liked to have understood more about their lives when they were younger because I only knew them when they were older.
So if you could be any animal besides a human being, what animal would you be and why?
I would be a sloth because because they just have a great life, don't they? They just relax and they're chilling and they're always cuddly. And I think it would be nice as somebody who's a very, say that, driven, go, go, go kind of person. I think I'd like to be an animal that just chills.
Okay. So if you could be on stage and in front of about 10 million people, and you had to sing a song karaoke style, what song would you choose to sing?
I would sing Total Eclipse of the Heart by Bonnie Tyler because that is one emotionally over the top cheesy song that I think everyone would enjoy.
That's awesome. So in front of that same stage, right?
Okay.
If you have to put together like a squad to dance with,
Hmm.
who would you recruit for your dance team, and what sort of dance would you orchestrate?
I would definitely dance with the Jabberwockies because they are absolutely awesome with their masks. And if I could wear one of them, maybe people wouldn't notice that I'm the weakling. I'm sure they would, but yeah. And I would dance whatever they wanted to dance because they're just so cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So if you could like put together your perfect day, money's not an
Hmm.
issue. You could like teleport wherever, so traveling's not an issue. What would you do
Okay.
in that perfect day?
I would go to Japan. I would eat loads of amazing food. I think I'd go to the countryside in Japan and just explore the temples and the atmosphere and meet the awesome people. Yeah, sounds boring, but that would just be so awesome, I think. And just be on an adventure. And I wouldn't have a plan. I'd just go there and want to eat the food and meet people and then just see where the day took me.
That's really cool. That's really cool. So, just have two more questions for you. I do want to thank you so much for coming to do the interview today. I've had a lot of fun. I hope you've enjoyed yourself as well.
Mm,
Um,
absolutely.
but if you had to say what your life's purpose was, what would that be?
I think my life's purpose is to be happy and be happy with people around, to make people happy around me and to have as much positive and kind energy as possible. I think kindness is really important, and I think to love and be loved is really important as well.
Very cool. Very cool. So last question for you. Is there anything about yourself that you think is an important part of who you are that I did not ask you about today? In other words, what did I miss?
Ooh, Good question. Um, I think it would probably be my vivid and crazy imagination, because I do have a very active one that I think allows me to come up with some pretty crazy ideas that sometimes are bad and sometimes are good. But it certainly helps keep my life interesting, and I think it keeps other people entertained around me as well. And maybe it will lead to some other business ideas one day.
Very cool, very cool. So, Jacynth, I wanna thank you so much for coming on the interview. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, and to everybody else who's listening, I want to thank you so much. I want to thank you for the support and for always listening to the show. Y'all are the reason that we do this, and if we can just positively impact you in any way, that would be enough for me. So I do want to thank you so much. But this has been another Project Egg interview. Today we've been talking to Jacynth Bassett from London, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So again, everybody, thank you. Let's build a better world together. Bye-bye.
Bye.